Um, Here we are, guys. This is the Most Important Thing podcast. I am Dylan Dudney, and I am lead of NFT3. And I have my lieutenant and brother in arms, Shashwat, who is our all things sort of marketing narrative right-hand guy, best guy in the world.
Stop it.
With
Stop it.
with with
That's enough.
you're like this guy is going
Yeah,
crazy here.
it's like the Indian in me comes out where it's like let's not, you know. But
That's
still,
like a British thing, right? It's like they say like British people like sorry, I'm not trying to
yeah, I
God,
know.
that sounded so racist. Like Indian to Indian me, and I'm like, no, that's a British thing. That may have been the
Yeah,
most offensive comment I've ever made to you yet.
I'm glad.
Like,
I'm glad this
let's
is going to be
erase
on
all
video
your
forever.
let's erase all your Indian
let,
identity
let,
and
let me
talk
tell you
about
what.
British
Maybe this
colonialism
is
here.
what we
But
need
you
to
know what
do
I'm
to go
saying. You
viral.
do know what
This
I'm
is
saying. Yeah.
this is I think this was a step in the right direction. If anything, let's do more of this, and this way we have higher odds of going viral. Especially now that Twitter is X and everything's fucked up. Nobody
No,
knows how to do
I'm gonna get canceled for that.
it. Listen, if the project succeeds because of this, I think it's worth it. You have the money already. What's the problem?
Oh man, wow. Can we rewind? Yeah, anyway.
Very good
But
start.
I'm sorry. Let me contextualize that better.
Mm,
Recently, I came across a meme, and they were like, and it was like this British person that was not able to take, like, they were like, British people can't take compliments,
right,
and I would
right.
yes, and I assume that there is
Mm.
some crossover with Indian culture because of the colonial horrible colonial past, and I apologize.
Oh my God, I'm enjoying how painful this is for you. That's what's
It's
to me,
hurting. It's hurting right now.
that's the best. Yeah, no, the funny thing about this is that I am generally actually good at that.
Mm,
But I mean, what I was kind of referring to was more like I think the generation of my parents and stuff. It, and by the way, there might be some crossover from there. I don't really know the source of like a lot of the Indian psyche is very hard. It's a very complex place to try and understand.
mm,
And so, but um, our parents' generation was a lot like not very free with their compliments, and if a lot of them are being thrown around, it's like a red flag. They're like, what? And so what I had been alluding to was like, so to us, it's like we're not very used to getting compliments from our parents much. So when it happens, it freaks us out and like, I don't know. But anyway, I think we should pivot back to the conversation here that we should be having, which is all
mm.
things Web3 and all things crypto and all things
Yes.
decentralized. And a lot of stuff has happened, man. And it's been some time since we did one of these. What is top of mind for you? Base chain, I'm gonna guess. Op BNB, what is it?
Um, Actually, AI is lately top of mind for me. To be honest, and adoption curves are also top of mind. And I just went to the blockchain futurist conference yesterday, and also top of mind is judging off of that conference. I was actually I was saying to a friend who was there, and I hope this isn't doesn't sound bad, but I was like it's really busy here, and I don't know why. And with not to diminish the organizers, anything like that, I mean, they did a great job, but I was thinking to myself, like, wow, this is actually really busy considering, what a nadir we're in for the industry as a whole. And so that was kind of encouraging. I was like, wow. And it was a lot of young people. It was like, I would say 80 to 90%, 20 to 30-year olds, or younger. And like I met an 18-year-old intern at Business Development Canada, BDC, and he's like, yeah, he's like super into Web3 and crypto, and I was like, wow, this is great. So, um, I think that that was counter to my expectation because of the past conferences I've been to lately. It's kind of been it hasn't been quite that level of enthusiasm. So I don't know if that's an anomalous thing or if it's part of a like if it's indicative that things are still just fine when it comes to kind of like overall interest in the space. Um, but yeah, I would probably want to cover the topics of AI and actual adoption and application layers in this conversation without going too long. I know that those are kind of broad topics, but those are things that definitely are interesting me at the
Mm-hmm.
moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm into anything that you want to talk about too, as
Yeah, no,
always.
I mean, obviously, we would love to sort of like jam more about adoption curve specifically, but just to sort of like uh, go back to that whole events side of things, I think, especially for somebody like you who's seen like I don't know how many cycles you've seen, right? Um, it's strange almost to realize that regardless of the cycle, the mass interest in Web3 is up only. And that might not mean builders right away, but now that so many of these physical events are happening, especially when they're paired with like nice locations or stuff like that, uh, that you will see people coming in. So I think my experience lately has been firstly not really wanting to go too much because like now that we're really back in building mode and going hard at that stuff, it's just too much work sometimes to be traveling all the time. uh, but I do think that overall there's more interest in these events from people who are newer to Web3 at the moment, which is very high value if you think about it. Because instead of just having to sit on a screen and figure out who's what, they can actually go meet some real builders and have some real conversations, with people that are like minded and so forth. So it's, I think, quite optimistic, which is funny because I wanted to talk about Airbnb. But, and I also think that that's indicative of some of our efforts ideologically speaking, right, having taken root in the sense that it's not just the speculation driving these people in, otherwise they would not be here right now, which is, I think, what some of the vets expect, that because earlier it was just either just speculation or just tech, right? Now that some people are ideologically interested, I would venture to say that's why they're more interested to come in and at least meet more people like that and take it from there.
Yeah, I think that's pretty insightful. I hadn't considered it that way, but yeah, if we see a lot of interest even during a bear market, could it be pretty indicative of an ideological interest rather than just a speculative one? And I think that that's arguable toward the positive that it is, because there's no immediate per se benefit. Things don't necessarily look good from the speculative side, um and I think it also may underscore the need that people have to want, especially younger people, to want to belong and to have a unique kind of identity in the world, something that they can tack onto and be like, I'm into this. So whether it's I'm into BMX dirt bike racing, or
Right.
whether it's
Right.
I'm into Web3 and crypto,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
that's an identification with a community and with something to do. And so identity is it just is like a in a very general sense is a very important
Mm.
thing to consider when it comes to these things. I think, how are
Yeah,
people identifying with it?
absolutely. I think it, you know, especially as somebody who's been marketing for a long time, right? We get desensitized to the idea of how important community really is because it's just drilled into us over and over again. So we kind of, go, yeah, okay, that's a given. But I think, and there's also, maybe I'm being overtly optimistic, but I think there's also a bit of a shift of tide where people, I think, now are sick of the doomsday theories about futurism all the time. Everything's going to shit and it's just all. And I think people are looking for, most of the youth realizes tech is inevitable and unstoppable, right? So I think they're looking for places where they can find the ideological hooks that are inherently benevolent, like that there's no fear around them of something going really left, like say biotechnology, for example.
Hmm.
You know, so I
Hmm.
think, I mean,
Hmm.
I had written this article recently, right? Web3 is greater than AI, and here is why. And because obviously AI has been top of mind for everybody, and it has been for me as well,
Hmm.
right? So, and we'll transition into that with this, I guess. But one of the things that I had realized was that I can think about AI in terms of efficiency, in terms of enhancing the capabilities one single human has, which is a remarkable thing and like not a small thing by any means, you know. But I find it difficult to visualize groups of people coming together and talking about AI doing, well, what? You know, it's like it could be a bunch of business people going, here's how we're going to improve our processes. That makes sense. But a Web3 conversation becomes a conversation about fairness, about, well, if the scale of most of the corporations on earth is global and they're all virtual, then should the users not have some kind of say in what they do, right? So it goes into governance, it goes into all of these other things that are inherently
Hmm.
philosophical. Whereas to discuss AI philosophically is like a really, it's a very problematic thing. And it also becomes much more like academic philosophy rather than the kind of philosophy we're talking about, where it's, well, how is it impacting society, you know? So I think
Hmm.
that also has something to do with people realizing that it's not just the sharpness of the tools but the fairness of them, I suppose. And you know, maybe that's the Web3 side of things. But tell
Yeah,
tell
that's
me, you were going to say
it's a
something.
cool analogy. The sharp. No, no. I was just
Yeah.
like, wow, that's a cool way of putting it. The sharpness, not the fairness of them. I was no. I
What's
think
been on your mind
that
with AI?
I mean, there's a massive amount of interest in AI. I remember in 2020, I had friends, whether it was other founders, that were sort of like involved in AI stuff, but there wasn't much, I didn't hear about too much interest. And then what really changed, I think, and a turning point in narrative for AI in the prosaic consciousness or mass consciousness was the release of, I guess it was GPT-4. Um, and and that really changed things because everybody's like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And we can do this and that and that and this. And totally agree, by the way. Like if you've used it, it's pretty interesting. One thing, but it's like, and so now there's all this massive VC interest and general interest in AI as a result of, I think, that application, right? Through um, OpenAI's efforts and Sam Altman's efforts, from a titular standpoint. And like, I don't know if that is like, I think it's a similar thing that's happening with AI that happened with, say, NFTs in the past. Now, I don't want to in any way directly parallel NFT technology with AI technology because I think that they're they have a real difference in kind and significance. Certainly, I wouldn't dispute that. But I do think that it's sort of like there's a real magnification of the narrative based on this idea that it's like going gangbusters right now, and there's all this interest, right? So it's just like further magnification just by virtue of it having this like its own momentum, which happens and has happened in our space, through several cycles, right? Because of the value of BTC or the value of an NFT that got sold or some pundit talking about it on, the television, right? Now the state of the art for AI. I mean, I need to get more and more involved in terms of my research of that stuff. But for me, toggling around with it, one limitation that I came across when I was working with GPT was, or GPT chat was, the it doesn't have anything in the past 2 years. So if you want like current information, it's not utilizing like current information for its ML off the internet. But that's, I guess, a pretty like a small point. Your point about whether like about the difference between Web3 and AI, I think is a good one. But there are there's an unsettling aspect just in general to this technology, which is that different from other technologies where all technologies that humans have developed are a kind of cognitive prosthesis, AI is like a cognitive replacement. And the extent to which it's a cognitive prosthesis or augmentation versus replacement is the extent to which it's unsettling and or not, right? And I likened this in a conversation I had with my girlfriend last night to I actually was like an analogy I just came up with, you know, patting myself on the back. But imagine that a dog, like I call it the raised by wolves analogy with AI. It's what I'm going to call it. So imagine a group of wolves raises a baby, right? And from, you know, infancy, and they bring it food and whatever, and it gets to 4, 5, 6 years old, and that's AI is the baby, and we are the wolves, and the point at which AI is at right now is sort of like in a relatively infantile, maybe toddler state. At some point that toddler is going to become, we know, given the capacity of that human versus the capacity of those wolves, that eventually the wolves will be leashed and will be fed. And when they're leashed and fed, they're going to be happy, and they're going to be pretty and let's, maybe dogs is a better analogy than wolves, because wolves might be pissed getting leashed, but let's say dogs instead. But they're going to be pretty happy about that, right? And they're not even going to know really that they have been leashed and fed, and now their relationship has changed. So I think that that's probably what's bound to happen with humanity and AI is we will be, and we will be leashed and fed in many ways by the results of what AI can achieve for us as a species. And we won't really, I think that process will be relatively gradual. And I think and I do think it's inevitable, and it's something that we're going to have to consider as a future scenario. It's not like a doomsday situation, but it's a situation where I think, I mean, we definitely have the abilities to put strictures on you know, the
I would
capacities of
disagree with that.
AIs to control.
I would,
Please, dude. This is what the point of this is
yeah.
please,
So
yeah.
so
I mean,
far I
if we were
completely
just
agree with you.
agreeing with each other all day, it
Yeah.
would be a very boring podcast.
Here's what I'm saying. So far I agree with you in the sense that you know how we have everybody everywhere has these professional blurbs, right? That you send, say, before a speaking slot or whatever, right? So in mine, I had actually put some thought to why I'm in Web3 and blockchain and and so forth. And so part of my blurb actually goes that one of my firm convictions is that out of blockchain, AI, and biotech, which are basically the three main frontiers of technology within our lifetimes, blockchain is definitely the most benign. So let us say that, to me, philosophically, it's the easiest to align with because I'm not afraid of how left it can go. There will be grifts, there will be scams. That is part of everything. That's like people selling potatoes are also scammers. That has nothing to do with the tech, right? But when we start discussing the very nature of the thing itself, obviously AI is more difficult to stomach, let us say, more difficult to digest. And in my opinion, for me personally, biotech is even more, like vastly more, right? That being said, and I mean, also going back to like my experiences before Web3, right? Like with the novel, and then with create. I was creating content around being worried about the state of the internet, like 5 6 years ago. And it's funny that I finally found the new evolution of the internet and kind of gave my life to it. But it goes to say that these things are not random. But I remember having thought about AI in this sense, reading a bunch of science fiction. I know you love Philip K. Dick, So over time, I realized that sure, this one I'm having less difficulty with philosophically, but I stumbled across this concept of technological inevitability, which is basically that I can live under a rock, ignore Bitcoin all I want, but it's here and it's going where it's going. And it's not, it can get a little woo woo if you go in that direction, but basically the idea about inevitability would be it's not the doing of a couple of human hands. I mean, it might look like that, mechanically speaking, somebody made it and so on and so forth, but it seems to almost arc out pretty much the same way in, say, 30 different works of science fiction written across the past 200 years, or everybody's conversations. If you aggregated all of that, it would basically amount to similar things of, oh, control of digital things needs to be distributed approximately, right? Star Wars has a similar thing. Every story ever playing out the future has a similar thing. So the part now that we get to where I'm disagreeing with you is that is the same for AI also. And that is also the same for biotech, by the way. So whether you and I want to be part of that industry and actively accelerate it is a different question. But the idea that they're inevitable, that's pretty hard to avoid, So then a corollary of it being a technological inevitability would be it's kind of like a juggernaut. To say you can fence it is laughable at best. It's like, you sure, man, okay. The people who have not been able to figure crypto out will do it, or the profiteers that are the corporations so far will do it. Who exactly are we thinking is going to go, no, let's put some rails on this thing? It's not,
Yeah.
and I mean, maybe that's a little jaded, but I don't actually, the hilarious thing about this is I used to be horrified of such scenarios, like I said 6 years ago, and now the funny thing is I have come to a place where I see a strange kind of justice in this, in the sense that the only way you can really do anything in this space or that space or any space is give your life to it and try and guide it gently through your own efforts in a direction you think is better. But again, I will preface that by saying I don't think we control much anyway. I don't think a few people on the aggregate make much of a difference. I mean, of course, when you zoom in, they make all the difference in the world, right? But that's the funny thing about personal choices versus macro outcomes. But so speaking to that point, I personally think almost everybody who will try to regulate XYZ, and you can fill in the blanks with that, could be coal, that could be like energy, that could be freaking blockchain, Web3, that could be AI, is going to use that to profiteer. And why that's an easy bet for me to make is that is exactly what has happened all throughout history. For anybody,
I don't think.
Yeah.
I may have been premature in thinking in saying that.
The thing about it is, this is what I remember reading Plato's Republic for the first time, And I mean, if you recall, even the Stoics and like Marcus Aurelius and that kind of stuff, right? They used to say, don't go expecting Plato's Republic. And while that's just, okay, don't be idealistic. If you really think about Plato, the guy tries to come up with an ideal society. It's very thorough. I think it's 13 chapters, if I remember correctly. It's been some time since I read, but I was, more naive then. But even then, I realized there's one very fatal flaw. He needs it to be a closed society. There are a lot of things that are not permitted in it. And in and of itself, that's not a bad thing. It just strikes against inevitability sometimes, is the problem. Is that that may not be possible. And if it's not possible, the entire assumption falls apart. And then that entire thing is, so that's why you could do it. Basically, you could maybe make a couple of villages that size, but you could never scale that, because as soon as more mindsets get in, it's over. So to me, it's a little bit like that,
Yeah, I love that you're bringing up science fiction writers, because it makes me think of Frank Herbert and Dune, and the way that Frank Herbert dealt with this question of 10,000 years in the future and what it would
the
look like.
Butlerian jihad, of course.
Yeah. So you know all about that. And he dealt with that question by saying, yeah, by saying there was basically a jihad on AI, right?
Devices, sure.
And yeah, and that was, and then after that, and so just thinking about what's not permitted in a future society, it allowed Frank Herbert the ability to not have to deal with an AI issue and to present a very like far in the future type of world in
Hmm.
almost like terms that were digestible to humans, right? Because humans were still in control of things. But yeah, I mean, I
It's
think
you're
that
right. It's funny. I mean, Dune is basically
yeah,
a medieval story set in so far a future
yes,
that all of this has been kind of that thing's finished also, right? So yeah, that is interesting to bring up for sure. But I think another one of my favorite sort of AI oriented science fiction thingies, is I, Robot by Asimov, and not the movie stuff. I'm not
yeah,
very familiar with that, but the book itself, right? So it's a bunch of stories
yeah.
basically, and this will tie into crypto also, by the way, which is funny. But so kind of the boiling point of I, Robot shows a scenario where the markets are the main thing, right? Because economy is essentially what's running our world for quite some time now, and so that's kind of the main thing. But it's global, multiplanetary, and code oriented, hence the crypto side of things, right? And being run by essentially self-thinking machines, essentially AI. And this much is okay, and again speaks to some of the inevitability point. Then it's interesting because that story basically says that a bunch of humans realize that those pieces of intelligence are actually manipulating the market. It's not as efficient as it could be. And it's much the same like humans manipulate markets. And they try but they have been coded to not do that. So it's quite insane for that to even be possible, you know? And they
Hmm.
try and dive into it. And the only philosophical explanation of that situation is that perfect efficiency might not be perfect. It might actually be problematic, or it might require the removal of humans, for example. So there's a couple of very dark inferences that can be drawn, but the one of the lighter
Hmm.
ones is that they're probably doing that to make space for us because they have been coded to make space for us. But so our aims on one side of maximizing efficiency, making everything well more machine-like, right, are inherently opposed to our own nature because it's not a machine.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
what I like about Asimov's world and the three laws of robotics is that there you see a framework which is very much pro-human and not in a, I hate to say it, but slave-like way, but in a very, we are the creators, hence this is how it is kind of a way, But to me, I feel like that is more realistic than a Dune sort of a situation because I mean, to be honest, Dune, like I said, one of my like favorite books of all time, but it's I think it oversimplifies when it deals with the tech. Like you said, he just basically dealt with that problem for his story, and he goes right back to power and humans and all of that stuff, but on an intergalactic plane, without dealing with the idea that that whole piece would be there. Because it's like going back to your earlier analogy, it's not that easy to kill something like that, you know uh, as long as much as we might want to believe it, you know especially if you think about, let's now turn into adoption curves for a second. Imagine this, we were talking about my Indian mother earlier, right? When we were little, the idea that your money, your payments, all of that stuff would be done with your phone was preposterous. And I don't mean preposterous in the
Hmm.
sense they
Hmm.
wouldn't be able to imagine that technology. I mean, they would, I can bet money on this. They had major security problems with that. You know, it was like something, this is not safe. We're not going to do it. And
I'm
I'm
old
not even,
enough to yeah, I'm old enough to remember the that no one was too comfortable giving their credit card information on
Right.
the internet, right?
Right.
And it was just like, let alone on your phone, which wasn't even really like
Exactly.
a
Exactly.
possibility then. You'd have to do it on computer, and we were
Right.
really weirded out by that.
So now you go from there to, and I'm not even talking about crypto payments here. I'm talking about UPI from India, right? Where basically it's like bank transactions. It's like Apple Pay on steroids. It's amazing, and its penetration is basically near complete. I can go to any corner of India, buy bananas with it for like $1. Everybody has UPI, you know, and it's inherently unsafe. It still is as unsafe as we thought it was, right? But so the thing I'm trying to get towards is, where are all of
Hmm.
those philosophical problems now? It seems like somewhere on the adoption curve, uh, let's call it the tipping point, right? The Malcolm Gladwell thing. It comes, and then every individual brain goes, society has accepted this, and then it doesn't argue it anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Hmm.
it's just off to the races,
That's a really great point.
right? And my hypothesis is, you can get to that point by just convenience. And this is, by the way, the problem of mass adoption for crypto is that the convenience is not there, right? But
Hmm.
everybody else, like, how did Facebook get there? It was just addictive. It was this, it was that, but it was basically just get to that point, and then people will forget about, oh, I'm putting my whole real life online. Oh, I'm doing this. All of those
Yeah.
like thought problems are in everybody's head, but they get silenced like this really quickly. So then now, if I take that forward and go, well, AI, especially ChatGPT, mad convenient. So it's going to hit that number. One can argue it has hit that number. And so what one might find is that the number of people who have qualms about it philosophically have reduced drastically already. Otherwise, it would really have been a bit of a debate, no? There's been no debate. And the funny thing is, me from 5 years ago, I would have been shocked, but now I completely get it. And so it's just, I think it's a question of realizing that most of us will not want to go through the butler. Like, that's a really difficult philosophical choice for the very few to make. And they will probably never have enough power again to be able to do anything. That's
Mm.
my hypothesis.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't disagree with that. And it actually makes me think about, when you're talking about adoption curve, it makes me think about and how people just eventually implicitly accept things. Maybe think about the adoption curve for crypto and Web3 and whatever you want to call it over the past 2 or 3 years. And I I felt very much in 2021, that it was basically kind of at that point. You had it was getting to that point where everybody just was like accepting it. Like we had FTX Arena. Um, we had all like we had Tom Brady in a Super Bowl. Like we had Super Bowl commercials. And it was getting to that point where, yeah, of course, crypto. Why wouldn't I? Like, and whereas, you know, coming into this from a very early standpoint where people didn't even know what I was talking about when I would mention Bitcoin, way back in 2010s, like to that, I felt, wow, okay, finally we're kind of at this implicit acceptance because it's just so widely adopted. Now we know how the story goes from there, which is I feel like we're kind of at that point, and then we just crashed tremendously, due to I think a lot of, well, for many reasons, but um, I think if we had continued on that trajectory, we may have, that type of adoption curve where people now no longer have that cognitive dissonance that they once held about whatever technology it is that we're talking about. But we have almost this double uphill battle now because now everyone was exposed to something that
Yeah.
it almost like went past that cognitive dissonance level where they just accepted it, but then it crashed like
Yeah. So now they
really
doubt it
badly.
doubly. You're right. Yeah.
So now there's a double doubt if it comes back, and that is, I think, a really big barrier to adoption in general. the DeFi areas of crypto have great application layers right now, in my opinion. It's where there, so I mean, crypto and Web3 having a basis in as assets or in decentralized finance applications, there's stuff for people to do. But in other areas, there's not as much going on. And I think that we're fortunate with NFT3 and in the sense that we almost sit in an adjacent spot to, like, we don't necessarily, like, yeah, we would want to prove the account based on cryptographic sign-offs of wallets and stuff like that, but we don't necessarily blockchain helps decentralized identity, but it doesn't.
It's not the
Decentralized
sum of
identity
it,
doesn't.
yes. Yeah.
It's not the sum of it. Thank you. So we're in a fortunate position there where yes, we're kind of like in the whole Web3 crypto niche, and that's an audience that we speak to. But I do think that we can speak to a much
Go beyond.
broader audience
Sure.
with decentralized identity. And that being said, like I'll drop this sort of like Easter egg in this conversation, which is that we will be rebranding from NFT3, which, I loved it and we loved it as a concept for, almost a couple of years now, and we raised based on it. But NFT, as it's not like a fundamental aspect of what we're doing now. So we're dropping that from our brand identity, and we'll be going to Root, which, uh, Root being, which is formerly known as NFT3, is a
I didn't
way
know you were gonna actually
to.
share the name. Damn.
Oh, should I not?
It's all right, man.
Never mind. Fake news. Fake news.
Look, this is your show. All good.
It's your show. It's our show. Oops. No, fake news. No, it's fine. It's no big deal. It'll be coming out soon. We'll roll it all out. But it's and the reason why Root was a good name is because it's very much we hope that it becomes the root of your identity and your experiences as you go through your many internet journeys, and have multiple types of data points mapped back to your decentralized identifier. And this is hopefully the basis for, um, uh, and hopefully we're a significant part of this revolution of data sovereignty. And
Yeah.
data sovereignty, I think, is going to be really important. And not just data sovereignty, but the ability to know what's real and what's not real on the
Yeah.
internet is going to become more and more important. Is already important. And considering that there's like $140 billion of ad tech spend going toward bots, I think we can do better. And I don't think that level. I think we can get way more efficient. Those dollars could be, used on something else than a program that people have written to click ads. So like, I think that if we can have a better assessment of what's real through our technology, then that's actually going to be really, really important as time goes on.
Now,
So
now that
yeah,
we're driving. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I was just
No,
gonna
you
drop
go. You
my
go.
sort of 2 cents in on the whole Root rebrand. Now that we are actually talking about it, I won't go too deep into this, and there's a lot that I want to roll out, in the way that it's supposed to be and all of that. But what I like about it is going back to that earlier conversation about adoption, crypto, convenience, and ideology, even as an element, right? Basically, the main mistake that our space has made from, I think, the very beginning is leading from the technology, or leading from it was a bunch of product people, or tech people. So it was
Mm.
always built from that perspective, and then spoken in those languages, right? And that's all fine if you're just trying to get more developers building, but not so much if you want users. Second layer of people coming in was speculators. So then it was, you're going to get rich doing this. Who gives a shit what it is? Let's just put money into it, take money out of it. So as much as, like you said, I love the NFT3 brand identity. I mean, to date, I think it might be my favorite website in crypto, which is very lame to say, being from it, but whatever. Uh, but
Mhm.
one of the mistakes, I think, if I was to call it a mistake, is that we should never be orienting from the technology's perspective anyway. We should be orienting from, and so the good thing is that in our marketing we kept basically talking about you being the central person, right? The user being the central person of the journey that they take throughout everything they do online, right? So I think Root speaks more directly to that than anything we could come up with, basically, which is why Root. But
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
to me, that shift from going from what tech we're using to what we want to do for you is the main pivot point of this brand upgrade, let's call it. In that, like you said, is it a crypto project, is it a blockchain project, hell, is it a decentralized identity? It's all of those things, and that's great, but that's not what I, the user, would care about. What does it do for me? Why should I be interested? The tech stack is fine, the speculation side is fine. I'm not dissing either of those. Those are um, integral for, I mean, for example, a lot of shitting on the speculation side of things goes on. And I mean, we've gone too long in this podcast. Maybe in the next episode we'll talk about shitcoin. But for example, like what I had wanted to say was, well, capital needs to flow for any of this to happen. So there is that.
Mhm.
It's like
Mhm.
you can only
Mhm.
diss it to a point, and then you need it, and then you go, oh well. So but yeah, for Root itself, absolutely, man. I think the future moving forward for us, it's I suppose that's one of the things you get from being like a decade in crypto like you were, is that you were able to pick a space that wasn't very easily pigeonholed. you know it's We can go many ways and be very flexible and have, like, Ismi is already out now, Ally has already been announced. There's like end products we can come out with that revolve around the user and not a technology stack. So that's, I think, somewhat prescient,
Mhm. Mhm.
and so I would commend you on that. But in general, I also think that for somebody who is just observing the state of the internet and not really bothered about these small little bubbles of Web3 and crypto and AI and blockchain, they would probably want something more unified, let us say. Somebody who is engaging with a larger problem than just one specific bubble. That's probably a longer arc for a project compared to something very hyper specific. It's arguable, maybe. I don't know, but I don't know. That's what I felt like right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, if the, I think the analogy, or not the analogy, maybe a historical example is, if you look at Amazon, they just they wanted to, or even PayPal, like, they just wanted to send, like, they actually wanted to send money between Palm Pilots. And then they wanted to send money through emails. Nobody was using them, and then eventually they hooked up with, there were all these eBay users that needed to use their service, and so it became the way to do payments on eBay. Um, and similarly with Bezos, I mean, the initial niche use case of Amazon was selling books. Like, get some books. Um, it wasn't
That still makes me
become
smile. I don't
the
see how that's a
central.
problem. This is a fantastic idea, bro. Send them, send them. I don't give a
Sell
shit.
some books.
I mean,
And
I
so, yeah.
all of the hating on the biggest billionaires on earth, and I just somehow I like Bezos more than everybody else because he wanted to do a business around books to begin with. That's nice, man. What's wrong
Yeah.
with that? But
Yeah. I
I get
mean,
what you mean.
but, like, it's like there was pets.com and there was books.com, which was Amazon, right? Books.com, like, worked, but pets.com did not. Um, but, like, I guess what I'm getting to is that you can definitely get to, like, comprehensive. You can build from these niche type of solutions. So maybe, for Root, it's we've discussed various kind of applications or products, like for example, credit scoring, or validated airdropping. But you can get to much larger problem sets through smaller ones, right? And I think that if we can build enough, sorry, I guess we're cheerleading our own project at this point, but hey,
Yeah, we should.
it's our podcast, so let's do it. But I think if you can get enough data points coming back to a person, you do solve that sort of basic computer science or internet problem of realness. You do make a solution um, on like the extent to which internet traffic is real or not real, and the amount of money that goes into advertising spend for that. So and you do, like, if you want to go from Web 2 to Web 3, here's the soundbite. If you want to go from Web 2 to Web 3, you need decentralized identity of some kind. You absolutely do. There's no question. And so, like, if you want that to be a reality, if we think that can be a reality, this technology is essential.
That's, I think, a good point to
Yeah.
lay it up and take it up another time. I think
Yeah.
it's interesting the kind of weird segues we've taken to get to this point. I can't even really trace it. But yeah, it's
I
been fun
can't
doing this
either.
again, man.
Don't try.
Right? It's like,
Yeah, likewise.
yeah, I don't know what happened, but it's been fun as usual. And I think we'll
Yep.
grab some more guests as well for the coming ones, like we used to before. But this is a good reboot, I think. Covers quite a bit of stuff. I
Yeah,
think
absolutely.
we can dive on more AI stuff moving forward, of course. And like I said, I actually wanted to talk more about liquidity in the market in this dire time if somehow all shit coins. What's up with that, right? And other funny stuff, I think. But this has been incredibly fun episode, and we'll see you folks soon.
Yeah, likewise. Okay. Take care, everybody.